Yeah, super looking forward to it.
Awesome. So maybe we could kick off. Do you mind giving like our audience who aren't already familiar with the paper, just what the idea is behind drowning it in documents and consequences of scaling re-rank or inference?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So actually, to start with, maybe I'll give a little backstory of how I even started in this. So I was an intern at Databricks in 2024, and I was completely new to information retrieval and RAG, and we were basically trying to understand better the cost quality trade-offs of RAG systems. And so, when I was familiarizing myself with it, obviously re-ranking and retrieval was a big part. And my mental model of this was sort of you have this first stage retrieval that happens, which is very fast with these pre-computed embeddings and use like similarity and other things. But it's usually not very precise and not very good. So it can be filtered, but it can filter down the set quickly. And then you have a second layer on top, which is the cross encoder to sort of re-rank this set with more information and more power. With this sort of mental model, you sort of have the re-ranker as like the stronger retriever, and then but maybe not as fast, and then the retrieval is very fast, but maybe not as strong. Um, and so when I was plotting out these curves, I was trying to understand these sort of ceilings and the different trade-offs if I retrieve more documents and rank it, how it works, and how like the sort of cost quality trade-off looks like. But one thing led to another, and basically after reading all these papers that only did top cake was like 15, 20, 30, maybe 50 at the time. I was just kind of like, oh, you know what? Let me just start really scaling this thing, trying to really see where the ceiling is. And of course, when I ended up scaling it, it sort of went up initially, but then after you got around like 100 documents, your quality recall at 10 just started plummeting. And I was new, I was an intern. I was like, oh no way, did I really make a mistake somewhere? Like, where is it? But after checking this really thoroughly and looking at the documents, it was actually true. There was no mistake. It was actually the recall was actually plummeting. And so that sort of led us to this question of like, what's actually going on here. And so that sort of led into this like drowning in documents paper of like understanding how re-rankers actually behave, especially when you push them to extreme. I'm happy to detail more. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing. I feel like cross encoders are such like an underappreciated hero of search, and I feel like most people like yeah, like just as you mentioned, just the idea of re-ranking from higher than say 100. I feel like arbitrarily like 100 is like you know
Hmm.
the sort of number that you choose to re-rank from. Yeah, and that's I love hearing that story of like scaling it up, 100, 200, 500,000, then seeing it decline and thinking that there's got to be like a bug
Yeah,
somewhere.
exactly. I mean, I'm looking at this, and so it's not at all conforming with the mental model that everyone I think in the community had. And so that was like, I guess, really, really hilarious. Because also, I think the crossing coders have way more information at test time than the like retrievers, right? Because they have both the query and the document to sort of give a score, as opposed to retriever, you're sort of finding an embedding such that at any given query and you encode it in the vector space, it like will happily show up when you do cosine similarity. It just seems like the re-ranker should have a much easier job. It should be better. So that was definitely crazy.
Yeah, I think you make a great point in the paper about connecting this with like robustness in deep learning, and you make this connection between the in-batch negatives that are used to train embedding
Hmm.
models because you have these huge batches to train embedding models, whereas re-rankers that you don't do that, and that's probably why they're just. I don't want to jump ahead too much
Yeah,
into
yeah.
this fan of hits and all that, but yeah, I guess like kind of some maybe like some quick practical takeaways. It kind of suggests you should be like tuning that K for your search systems. I'm kind of curious, just maybe right out of the gate, how it changed your thinking of how to build these retrieve then re-rank pipelines and just how you think about it now.
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing was um, I think it definitely showed the sensitivity to these sort of values. I think, previously, as we mentioned, like the literature was very, very set on like these small numbers, very, I guess, very small set of numbers that they would use. And basically they wouldn't try all these different things. And I think it sort of led me to the belief that basically these things are very, not only, I guess, the retriever needs to be, I guess, selected properly in the ranker, but also all these other variables too that are knobs that you can actually turn to make your system work properly. So if that's one thing I think definitely is it expanded the set of what you should be able to worry about in retrieval. And I think it also helped me, I guess, understand or think about these cascading sort of systems differently. So it's not if this prior belief was more so it's like You stack these sort of things, and it goes, I guess like the first stage one is the weakest, and then the second stage will be stronger, and the third stage will be stronger. But it's not actually how I guess we should maybe view this in the paper, and actually some of my collaborators like we make this sort of connection to boosting almost, where you're not actually maybe a strong remakers are not maybe stronger than retrievers. They're just very good at fitting on the errors that the retriever gives you in these common settings. And so once you start blowing up the the K size, it starts doing much poorly because it's not things they would have seen in training. Um, yeah, and I think honestly, also the third thing, if I is that it sort of points to like I guess how maybe brittle these generalization like these things we generalize are because if rankers can distinguish between these really hard documents, but if you give it and we can maybe talk about this later in the phantom hits part, you give it some random document, it'll score it super high, and maybe it's not actually generalizing, just because it can distinguish between two really hard documents doesn't necessarily mean it's like better at actually understanding it, but maybe just distinguishing within that sort of area, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think about. Well, I guess just generalization in general is such a mystery to me, even now. Even though
Yeah,
AI absolutely works, even now. But yeah, yeah,
yeah,
awesome. So yeah, I guess I already just want to just